Welcome back to our channel. If you are new here, my name is Sarah and I am a professional organizer and expert declutterer. And today I am joined by two amazing friends, Paul and Stephanie, and we are going to be talking all things neurodiversity and mental health. So if you also have some of these neurodiversities, we are friends. You are amongst people who love and understand you. If you have any questions for us, please just pop a Q in front of your comment. It just lets us know that you've got a question. I would also love to hear where you guys are watching from. We love to know, so let us know down in that chat and let's get started. So guys, just to start us off, we are not medical professionals. We are just three friends who are diagnosed with different conditions. And so none of what we say today should be taken as medical advice. We are just here to support you and share some of our own personal experiences. But now I'm going to bring in two amazing people, and I know that you are going to love them as much as I do. Paul and Stephanie. Hey!
Hello! Hey!
So guys, thank you so much for joining us. We have a Marcus here. We've got Krishna from West Michigan. I know you guys, it's cold for you. It's stinking hot for me. So I'm going to let you guys know this is Paul and Stephanie. I'm going to throw to Steph so that she can introduce herself. So if you're new here, you can get to know us and then we'll deep dive. So Steph, you introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Stephanie Giesecke and I am ADHD diagnosed, anxiety, depression, but I love to take my ADHD and use it as a superpower and help others do the same. What I do for a job or kind of freelancing, copywriting, I help bring technology into the workplace, help you be more, your processes more streamlined with technology. I have been diving into the augmented reality space, NFTs, cryptocurrency. It's been amazing. So I like to do a lot of things. It's another thing with ADHD is the whole multi-passionate thing.
That sums you up perfectly, Steph, the jack of all trades and master of them all, if I may say so myself. Now, Paul, let us know who you are.
Hey, my name is Paul. Real quick, Sarah, I'm going to call you out, and I love this yesterday when we were talking about doing this. You're like, listen, Paul, I read your LinkedIn and I don't really know how to introduce you because you have so many. So you're like, Paul, you take it from there. And I love that. I love that you're like, listen, your LinkedIn is a mess, Paul. You take it over.
The OCD in me called you out. I'm sorry, Paul.
No, but it was 100% true.
All right, but let us know, how would you like to be described from now on?
Sure. So I am a teacher, and so I am a communications teacher. I help people in communication, and I do that through the lens of improv. So I approach people and let them know that I'm a communications coach because that is a much easier thing to understand than improv. And I do a lot of my coaching through improv exercises, and that's how I help people feel more comfortable on camera or on stage or behind the podium. So that's what I love doing.
That is awesome. I've actually done one of Paul's improv classes and I was so nervous going in. I was like, oh, I'm not going to know what to say. I'm not going to know what to do. And Paul's personality, it just puts you at ease immediately. And then you're ready and willing to do wherever it takes you, right, Paul? It's just such a cool, no matter even if you never want to do improv, there's so many things to be learned from it, right?
Yeah, the conversation goes anywhere, which is so applicable to like everything in sales, in speeches, and live streaming. Like you don't know where it's going to go, but at least knowing and having the confidence that you'll be great in any situation. That's what improv's about.
That is awesome. So, of course, we are here as the diagnosed panel because we all have different diagnoses. So I thought just for you guys in the chat, we would go through a little bit about what our diagnosis is, what it's sort of been like to live with it for a little while. And if you would like to share with us in the chat, if you have any mental health diagnosis or neurodiversity, it just helps other people in the chat sort of feel comfortable. I always say that shared experience is like social glue. So if you have anything you want to share with us, make sure you pop it in that chat. But I'll start off. So I have obsessive compulsive disorder, and of course, that is really closely linked with anxiety. So as I think a lot of different, particularly mental health diagnoses are, that they present themselves in different ways, but for me, it can be in those obsessive compulsive traits, behaviors that come through when I'm really anxious. So I also have some really neurodiverse children. Two of my children have ADHD and autism spectrum disorder. I also have a child that has Tourette's and a child who has a sensory processing disorder. So I have like a lot of experience, speaking with professionals and learning to tailor our life around those different needs. And one thing that I've learned over the course of working with clients who have, compulsive hoarding, is that, the journey that we take to get somewhere might be completely different, but we can all still succeed and find ways to sort of hack our brain. And I know that the same is true for Steph and Paul, that we've sort of found these ways to hack our brains, to find things that work for us. And so, yeah, if you guys, I can see Lacey has some OCD tendencies. I know that Marcus is ADHD diagnosed. And so those sorts of things, just hearing from other people and talking about these things, bringing them to light is what we are all about. We are really passionate about taking away shame and stigma and, saying, hey, I do things differently and that's completely fine. So Steph, did you want to share a little bit about your diagnosis?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with ADHD in, I want to say it was probably high school. And I remember doing the testing and my mom really wasn't sure about the medication. So we didn't go like the medication route, but what she did instead is just talk to my high school and say, whenever she needs to get up from a class, just give her a hall pass and let her just walk around the school. So I obviously didn't do that every single class, but when there were times where I was like, oh, really fidgety or something, I would just ask the teacher for a hall pass and just like zoom around and walk super, super fast in the hallways, just so I can kind of get some of that energy out and refocus. So I've had ADHD for a long time, but I've I don't want to say I've hidden it, but I didn't really understand the whole depth or breadth of all of like the symptoms and the workarounds that I've actually had to do. So I've been really trying, I think probably the last year, to kind of look at, okay, what am I doing? Why do I keep trying to make everything else fit my brain, where now I am just having like these tools and things that are processes, things that I use. It's actually working with my brain instead of against it.
And I think that's so common, Steph, that instead of trying to find the square hole, we just try to keep shoving that square peg into the round hole. Like, I'm gonna make this work. I'm going to keep doing whatever the neurotypical people can do, and it just doesn't work that same way. So Paul, what is your diagnosis?
Yeah, so my diagnosis is depression and anxiety, and something happened.
Thank you, Marcus, for the super chat. You're the best.
Ooh,
Woo.
thanks, Marcus. So depression and anxiety, and then I am not like official, and definitely OCD as well, which I think very similar to you, Sarah. It really kind of manifests itself when I'm very anxious. All of a sudden, when I'm anxious, I got to start checking those doors more and all that sort of stuff. And then also, I'm not officially diagnosed, But I do have a therapist who made this suggestion. Like he's like, "Oh, a lot of your stuff sounds very. It sounds like you're bipolar, bipolar too." And I was like, "Oh, I'd never thought of that before." And then I read a really, really helpful book, and I'd love to dive into that more. And everything I was reading, I was like, "Wow, this is very accurate." So that's been very helpful.
And
So.
isn't, I know that we just as friends have talked about this before, but we grew up in the 80s where perhaps there wasn't as much knowledge about the different, neurodiversities that exist and how they present differently in girls and boys and things like that. And so a lot of people are now discovering as adults. I know that Amy has said, I wonder if I do have ADHD. And one of the things that I was talking to my kid's pediatrician about was so many adults he sees bring their kids in, they get diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, or a sensory processing disorder, and then they're like, oh, I think I have that, and that's why my kid has it. And so just there is a real freedom in reading things about yourself and realizing that there's nothing wrong with you. It's just your
Mhm.
brain is geared in a different way. And, there's things like TikTok and great YouTube channels out now that are sort of making people realize that, hey, this is okay that my brain works in a different way. So, but also that, there are people who've gone a long period of time doing those hard yards of, trying to fit the square peg into the round hole. So,
Mhm.
Paul, has there been times where, looking back now, that you see that you were really just struggling and without knowing what it was that was causing you to struggle?
Yeah, so you mentioned the 80s, and yes, as an 80s kid, I know a lot about DuckTales. I know a lot about Rescue Rangers. I know a lot about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but I did not know a lot about like neurodiversity and like the things I was dealing with. It just wasn't like really talked about. Um, so yeah, there are many instances where I was like, oh, if I had the tools now, I would have probably approached that in a totally different way. And you're right, like you mentioned TikTok, and there are so like Instagram, TikTok, like love it or hate it, it is a great way of finding people who are similar to you and not feeling alone. So that is a really awesome, that is a really wonderful tool to be like, oh, okay, I'm not the only person dealing with this.
Yes, exactly. And, we were just talking about how TikTok sometimes actually bring a visual realization to what is happening in our minds, and so we can send that to someone and say, this is how it feels like to be me, to be inside. So Steph, I know you mentioned that you were diagnosed, sort of earlier in life, but are there still things that you're discovering about yourself now that you look back and were like, oh, this is why I found that hard, or this is why things have been difficult in that area for me?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I got diagnosed, it was really more just the hyperactive side because I was just like constantly going. I always had to have my feet going. And when I was sitting down, my knees, like everything was always shaking. And so it was more like the hyperactive side. I didn't really know what the whole ADHD was until seriously recently when I'm looking back, like, oh my gosh, that was ADHD. And you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier when you talked about how you're going through life thinking that I was just broken and there was something wrong with me. And then all of the having that anxiety around the guilt and the shame, like, why don't I do things like regular people? And I like to be different. So I don't want to say that I don't like to be different because I really do. But it was just like, why am I so much different than everybody else? And why do I feel broken? And I don't think that way that you do, but really being accepting of it now. And like, I am who I am meant to be, and I'm in the place where I'm meant to be at. And ADHD is totally a part of my life, and I have completely embraced that now and not like try to hide it or anything. It's just, this is me. All the craziness comes with me, all the hyper focus things. And it's just been helpful. But like you said, with you looking back on things, I have just like seriously been looking back on certain events in my life or things that happened in school or like what I will, I can still do it now, but to keep like when I'm trying to concentrate when people are talking, like meetings, oh my gosh, I just want to stick a fork in my eye with meetings. So to keep my brain going, I will just, I will just like keep
No, I
writing
get it.
notes. Like I know you're right, like tons of notes, and I have notes like everywhere. I've got notes from these are aqua notes from in the shower. Like I write notes everywhere, but I'll also write notes backwards. And I think I started that in high school, where I just write backwards, like just regular printing, and then I'm like, that wasn't difficult enough. Let me try cursive backwards. So all my notes would be in cursive, and my teachers would be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, I don't know. I'm just keeping my brain occupied while you're
Yep.
talking. So I did that in
That's
college
incredible.
through my master's
That's pretty
program, and
cool.
still I'll do that even on my whiteboards too. I'll just be like writing backwards just to keep my brain going. I know, total weirdo.
No, definitely not a weirdo. And I remember when my daughter was diagnosed, her pediatrician turned to her and he said, Siri, do you know that you have a superpower? Do you know that you see the world in the way that most people don't? And I think that sometimes, there is so much guilt and shame, like you mentioned, Steph, attached to these diagnoses. But in actual fact, it's this richness of neurodiversities and even mental health challenges that actually make the world this beautiful place that it is. And as we start to talk not only about the challenges, but about how that makes us special, how we can do things differently, that is really powerful, particularly for kids and for adults who have been diagnosed later, to realize that there's nothing wrong with you. There's just a different route to go to get there. Route, that's another Aussie American thing, isn't it?
Yeah, don't make me say the Minnesotan. Oh my gosh, I just said it, the Minnesota way. Oh, I can't.
I was
So
thinking if there are people out there studying accents, what a beautiful live stream to watch. You're getting 3 accents. You are wow. Wow, you are supercharging your
yeah,
abilities right
there
now.
we go. You're gonna be. I love Stephanie's Minnesota accent, but the only other exposure I've had to a Minnesota accent is from the show Fargo. And so every time I hear Steph talk, all I can hear is Fargo in my head.
Fargo, don't you
To
know?
know, don't you know? Exactly. So if you could work that in for us, Steph, that'd be great.
I'll do it.
So, as far as superpowers go, I think sometimes if you have, say, a mental health challenge, which, is really sort of only ever labeled as this sickness or a disability and all those words that have really negative connotations around that, I wanted to kind of bring to light some of the things that we have found actually make it really cool. So for me, with OCD, I know that the same compulsions that I have to clean or to do things repetitively are the same compulsions that hoarders have to hold on to things. And so I have found that having someone like me to come into a hoarding situation is what my level of empathy, my level of understanding, my level of being able to rejig their brain so that they can sort of get to a place where they can let things go has sort of become my superpower, for lack of a better way of putting it. So, Paul, have you ever found that, even with whether it's bipolar or anxiety, that there are some things that actually make you super special?
Yeah. Um, yeah, so anxiety especially. So for me, the gift that is anxiety, it's weird to say it's a gift, but sometimes it is a gift, that being anxious makes you just hyper aware of everything. And because your brain is being anxious about everything and like possible threats. So I find that I'm very observant and notice things other people don't notice. And for me, in comedy especially, it's helped me notice things. And for me, writing it down and just being like, huh, why is that interesting to me? Just write it down and then just observe it, write it down, and just kind of explore that as an idea. So just kind of like, so it's almost like anxiety and OCD team up. So I observe something, and then OCD just makes me like circle around that thing forever until I find something humorous about it. So it's really kind of a very cool pairing in a way. So
And I would say something else, like along those same lines that I've experienced with you, Paul, personally, is because you're so observant, is that that gives you that greater level of empathy to see that anxiety in someone else and then
mhm.
be able to call out and reassure it. And I know that in improv, so much of it is about supporting those other people on stage with you. In fact, it's almost more important than what's coming out of your mouth is like what's coming out of your mouth is to support those other people. And so that level of empathy about sort of being able to feel what's going on because you know what those feelings look and feel like then makes you sort of more receptive to those other people and what they're feeling.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about trying to help relieve somebody else's anxiety is that you are setting your own anxiety and depression aside for a second. You're like just putting it in a chair and saying like, I'll get to you guys later. I gotta help this other person,
I
and
need
then you come back after helping that person. You're like, oh, I didn't have to live with you guys for a while. That was pretty nice. Yeah. So
So, Steph, what about you? Like, as far as finding that superpower for ADHD and just your quirkiness as a person?
So I think kind of similar to Paul, where so I have with my anxiety, I am always like perceiving those threats or looking out everywhere. It kind of feels like it's a force field almost, where I'm also an empath, so I take in everybody's emotions. Like I can feel if I'm like 5 feet away from you, I'm like, oh, you must have had a bad day, or oh, there's something going on here. So then I ask questions, and so it's like making those connections. But then with my ADHD, I like hyper focus and I make all these connections. I like with Paul what he was saying, writing things down, even though I don't think I need this piece of information right now, I will put it down in my Rome research knowledge graph, or I'll just write it on those aqua notes that I showed you, or I have like just pages and pages of this Levenger paper that I use because I'll be working on something in this main area, but then there's this annotation column. I don't know if you can totally see that, but that's where I put, like, if I'm working on something and I get distracted, like with my ADHD, like, no, you need to work or you need to think about this. Like with my anxiety too, it's like, oh, you forgot about that. You got to do that later today. I'll just write
mm,
it in this annotation column and then just go back to it later. Because what I used to do is like fixate on that and be like, okay, I've got to completely stop what I'm doing and work on that other thing. Where now I'm like, no, I'm just going to keep going. But so I kind of feel like my ADHD and the anxiety that I have, kind of like what Paul says, they team up with each other because then I'm connecting things. I like to organize things, create really cool process flows, and get all that working. I don't like to I don't want to say I don't like to do it. I would rather set everything up, research it, create cool things for people, and then they could take it and do things with it. Like I don't need to see the finished product or that kind of part. Like I don't need to see the end. I just like to see the beginning, get going, and then I'm off.
And like that skill, the ability to be able to jump in and jump out, that is like probably the opposite of what I am. I am like, I'm here for the long haul. Bring
mm.
me in, let me bring in routines, let me come back, like I'll walk you through this whole process. And it's realizing that it's the combination of all of these things. It's the combination of the empaths that are really, sensitive to other people's feelings, who can help them overcome their anxiety and also help themselves. I think that we always think of the people who are going to help us as the professionals. They are the people who've got it all together, when in actual fact, it's a guide we're looking for, someone just a few steps ahead of us that can take us by the hand, that they're not up on this mountain that we have to achieve. They're here with us, like us. We are here to talk about these issues because all three of us are really passionate about bringing these things to light, that there's nothing wrong with you and that there are ways around all of these things. So Let's go. Roy was saying, my issues make me different. For a long time, it was a struggle, and I thought I had to work hard to appear normal. But there is much more happiness in being who I am. And like Steph, I know you said this as well. Thank you so much for the super chat, Marcus. That we all feel like this needs to be hidden. And, you know, on my channel, I do cleaning videos because I love cleaning, and I think that people who maybe don't love cleaning as much as me can sort of glean some things when I'm doing it. But I received a really sort of nasty comment about you must have ADHD, you must have ADHD, you must have OCD, and you're going to pass that on to your kids. And I was like, yeah, I do have OCD, and it's okay. And you know, I thought instead of going back into my little turtle shell and being like, oh, I don't want anyone to know about it, I thought, you know what? I'm actually going to spin this on its head, and I'm going to say, yeah, I do. And I still have really a lot of fun with my kids. I still allow mess. I still know when my compulsive behaviors are starting to get to a point where I can't manage, and that means I need to look for help. Because I think one of the other superpowers we have is that we have a barometer for how we're feeling. So my barometer is, you know, those obsessive things. I feel like I need to clean the shower for 3 hours. And then I'm like, I think there's something deeper going on here that lets me know I probably need to reach out and see a counselor or a therapist. So do you guys feel like you have a barometer, Steph, that you know when you're feeling a bit manic or something like that, that's a good indication that something else is going on?
Yeah, so I, with my ADHD and like my hyper focus, and I have to be working on so many things at the same time. I cannot focus on one thing. And believe me, I have spent 44 years, am I 44? Yeah, trying to just do what everybody said, just focus on one thing at a time. It doesn't work. It does not work for my brain. So I just have to have everything organized and then do, more than one thing. But I think because I take on so much, then all of a sudden I don't realize. I need to find a way to realize when it's getting to be too much. There are some times where I'm like, oh my gosh, I tell my family, like, I'm going upstairs to be alone for 30 minutes. I'm going to have a board meeting. And they're like, who are you having a board meeting with? I'm like, I am the vice president. I'm the CEO. I'm the CFO. I'm having a board meeting with myself. But shh, don't come in because I'm having this meeting. So I'll just be like, oh, board meeting. I'm out of here. But I need to figure out a way to, when I get to those episodes when I know that I've taken on way too much, to not let it get to be where I'm like, oh my gosh, I just have to go hide somewhere. I need to figure out that barometer.
Yep. And thank you so much for the super chat, John. I'm so glad that you brought this up, Steph, because, I think that we automatically, that there are things that we've decided ADHD looks like, or we've decided that anxiety and depression looks like. Because if I didn't know Paul the way I know him now, I would have seen a artistic director, a comedian, a improv teacher. I would have thought, you know what? No one with anxiety could do that, because, surely performing and public speaking has got to be so high on that, list of what would give people anxiety. And so, Paul, do you think that sometimes those ideas of what we have, of that an ADHD person wouldn't want to go and be alone because they need to be with people, because they're manic, because of all of those things, or that, in your case, a performer, doesn't look like what people have in their brain?
Yeah, I think when you see somebody on stage, you're just assuming like, oh, wow, this person really loves to be seen, and that must extend past the stage to their entire life. They must always be really energetic and excited and always performing. And sometimes that's true. I mean, I have people in my life that say, hey, you can just, you can chill out. You don't have to perform right now. So there are certain times where you feel like you have to be at a very high level, or well, what you think is a high level. But truthfully, like, I don't know. I've found, especially in performing with a lot of different people, that there are a lot of introverts, a lot of extroverts, as well performing, and a lot of people are dealing with anxiety and depression, and they're up for a little bit, and they want to perform, and they want to share some comedy and give people some laughter, but then they need to kind of retreat into their shell, into their little world. um, yeah, so you just meet every type of person. So I mean, I guess what I've learned is that don't make an assumption on what depression and anxiety looks like, because if you see somebody on stage, don't be like, well, I know who this person must be in their life all the time. um,
Yeah.
so yeah.
And I mean, it's the same for YouTube, right? Like, I think that as I've met more creators, I assumed that most people who created on YouTube would be extroverts, and
Hmm.
that's not necessarily true. And I'm also really aware that when I put a video out, that I'm putting out a highly edited version of whatever it is I'm doing. I take out all of my ums and my all of those things to create, something that's pleasant to watch. But that's not me. I don't say everything perfect. I don't clean at 4 times the speed, even though I wish I did. Um, so, just realizing that, we don't know what everyone is dealing with, and that, some of our preconceived ideas, particularly around, neurodiversities. I have a very outgoing little girl who has autism spectrum disorder, which is not necessarily what we think of when we think of ASD, that we sometimes think of, the people who don't speak at all. And of course, all of these things are a spectrum. And just because
Hmm.
you don't fit maybe in that spectrum that people have in their mind doesn't invalidate what has happened to you or what your experiences are. So, yeah, I mean, we were talking a little bit, Paul, about just your own self discovery around diagnosis, that whether
Hmm.
you've actually been diagnosed or not, you can still be experiencing, things that are from bipolar or OCD like tendencies without actually having OCD.
Yeah, and I think also, and if this is, I hope this helps, that sometimes we really love a label, but the label doesn't tell us everything. So it's like, you might say like, "Oh, I'm depressed and anxious," and you might read all about depression and anxiety and be like, "Well, this doesn't answer everything. Oh, there must be something wrong with me." No, not necessarily. I don't think so. I think just like go discover other things, like read about bipolar, or go read about other issues, OCD, ADHD. Like there might be things within ADHD and OCD that help you live a better life. So just go kind of like expose yourself to that, learn about that, and absorb it. And if it helps you, it helps you.
And
But
Paul,
I
like
think the
what you were
labels
saying,
sometimes.
oh,
No, no, I was done.
sorry.
So all
No, what you're
yours.
talking about with the label, I think that is so totally true. In that knowing, and what Sarah talked about with like a spectrum, because whenever people are saying, "Oh, you have ADHD, you must be late all the time." No, and I don't know if it's because of my anxiety too. I am at least a half an hour early for everything, like even picking up the kids from school, or I'll just sit and scroll through TikTok. I'm always early. I'm never late. So when people talk about ADHD people being late, I'm like, "Oh, no." And then I could show you, like, I have alarms for everything. Because like even before this, I had an alarm on what time do I need to curl my hair, what time do I need to
Mhm.
make sure my microphones were working, what time do I need to make sure to do my camera. And I have it all on there, because otherwise my brain will just keep thinking about it, and I seriously will not be able to do anything else. I'll be like, "Oh, I know I got to do all of these things, but I can't work on this other project because I know it's hanging out there." Maybe it should be my little squirrel friend here. It's like, it's sitting out there. It's like, "Hey, I am here. You can't work on anything else." So I have these alarms, and I plan things out, like seriously down to the minute.
Mhm.
And I mean, that is another sort of idea that people have about people with ADHD, that they're really messy, that they can't be organized. And those things are just really broad spectrums that even probably aren't true of any person all the time. So there are people that have ADHD and maybe they are messy and maybe they are late, but if something is really important to them, or if they can train themselves to give themselves adapters to help with those things, to be on time, and for things, if it's really important, it's super easy for them to be on time. It's super easy for them to be organized. And so touching on those things, Steph, I know that you mentioned about the alarms, but is there some other things that you have found particularly helpful for sort of hacking your brain, as far as, hey, I can do all of these things, but I need to do it in a different way?
Yeah, I think part of it was the way I take notes and have other notes in the annotation or that other column, but also with the digital notes, I use Rome Research. I found that in January, because you can be working on something and then you drop in or you type in double brackets. And if I was thinking about the YouTube video I'm gonna do tomorrow, I'm like, oh, I didn't do my thumbnail yet. I could do double brackets, or I could do a / and say to do, and then write that in. And that could be right in what I'm working on at the time. And I don't have to leave that project, and it'll automatically just put it to where it's supposed to go. Or if I'm thinking about another big project, like if I want to do the video script, I could do double brackets and say video script for YouTube, and then it'll put it on that page. But then, because, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm admitting this to everybody, but because I read so much, I can't stop, constantly researching. My friends joke a lot of times, when we're in a group text, they're like, oh, does anybody know something about this? Oh, just wait till Stephanie gets on. She'll be able to tell us, because I just, not that I know everything. I do not claim to know everything, but I read so much, so I know a lot is going on, but I have my Kindle synced to Readwise, so then it pushes things over into my Rome Research graph. I have tweets. I used to do tons of screenshots of tweets, but now I just push it over and it goes to Readwise, and it goes to my Rome Research graph. So I can go back and process things through, because I'll just have maybe a little idea, or with these Aqua Notes too, when I'm in the shower, I will just write those down, and then I'll bring them downstairs with me, and then I'll type them into my Rome Research graph. But so I've kind of hacked that part, where technology is really helping me with all of my scattered thoughts.
And, for ADHD, if I'm working on an organizing project for someone with ADHD, I will usually do similar things to what you have done, in that I will say, okay, we need everything you need to make coffee in this one place. Because if you start having to, go back to Twitter, go upstairs to get your notebook, all of those things, go to another website to access those notes that you haven't pushed out, that can lead down a path that, distracts you from what you want to be doing. And so things like that. And then once you've had that win, like Steph has had in her work life, of being able to push everything to the one space where she needs it, you can actually use those same techniques in lots of different areas of, if it's a cleaning basket, that when you clean, you've got everything you need, so you're not going to be going up and down stairs all the time, or, breaking things down into little bite-sized pieces, if that's what your brain needs. For me, with OCD, I actually do the reverse of what Steph does. I set a timer for myself, so that I don't do things for too long, so that I don't clean for 3 hours at a time. That, I've got an hour to clean, so I'm going to let go of some of that perfection and focus on the timer. So, Paul, has there been anything that you've used to sort of hack those, anxious thoughts and that sort of thing, to help, be more productive?
So speaking of anxious thoughts, are you guys trying to think about how to move your hand in a way? Because I keep doing this. I'm like, no, that's terrible. I should do this. But then when I do this, I'm like, oh, Paul, you're just poking your cheek. You got fat, chubby cheeks. Stop it. So
I keep sticking my chin out so you don't see the double chin. I don't know if anybody's noticing, but then when I go back, and I'm like,
that's why I didn't shave today, because I'm like, I gotta look thinner. So I didn't.
You do some contouring.
Exactly.
We're all about it. We're all about it.
So things I do. So technology has been really helpful. So there's a couple things. Uh, there is a couple Chrome extensions. There's a Chrome extension where you can turn off. I mean, I know people are really big into turning off ads, but there's a Chrome extension where you can turn off the views that a video has gotten, and you can turn off the subscribers a person has gotten, and that changes YouTube so much. When it recommends like a show, and you're like, oh, I should probably watch this. 2 million other people have watched this. There's probably some value here. And you don't
Wait,
go
so
off,
it
you're not,
hides theirs? It hides like it's not like when you're doing a live, it's when you see their
no.
videos, it hides that.
When you go into YouTube, it like literally will hide the view count for other videos. So you're just faced with that thumbnail, and you look at that thumbnail, you look at that title, and you're not swayed, because I know we get very swayed by things. You're not swayed by that number, and it's like stripping those little things out in your life really
Oh,
changes YouTube a lot. So so that's been helpful. And then so that's a little piece of tech that I love using. The other thing is I have a I have a Google Drive Excel spreadsheet, and I have a sheet that is just there for me to write down phrases and words. And uh, I'm sorry, I missed that quote about I have a double chin, and it pops up whenever it wants. Siri knows. Yeah, you and me both, Siri. I get it. Um, so I have I'm so distracted now. I have an Excel spreadsheet where I just write down like phrases and words and ideas, and then I have another sheet where I shift those ideas and words into actual sketch ideas, and then I have a sheet that just lists all the sketches I want to shoot and the days I want to shoot them. So there's kind of like a gradual process where I just get ideas out of my brain. I just land that plane, because like if you just have that idea floating around your head, like it just never lands. If you just get it out on paper, I feel like, and I have no science to back this up, I feel like once it's on paper, then it kind of sinks down into your unconscious. And then when it's in your unconscious, it has a chance to like bump into all the other ideas. And
it's
it's
like
just,
bumper cars down there.
yeah, it's a bumpers cars, it's a singles bar, and all the ideas are looking to hook up. And I should get should make a
I
shirt
need
that
a
says
shirt
my
made
ideas
like
are
that.
looking to hook up.
Yeah.
So yeah, so then like once it's in the unconscious bar, it just is like hooking up with other ideas, and then it kind of shows up and it says like, hey, look at this pairing. And I'm like, that's a great sketch idea. So for me, writing it out and letting it get out of my conscious brain is super helpful.
And I think that writing stuff down is a tool that I suggest for almost every different type of neurodiversity. I've seen it in my kids. I actually call it mental decluttering, and it's not that you forget that, it's just that once you've written it down, it gives your brain that space to like release it. I describe it to my teenage son as like the RAM, or the amount of apps he has open. And it's like, if you can write this down, it's gonna alleviate some of that stuff that you've got open in your brain, and you can come back to it when you're ready. Another thing that, just touching on those little things that can really, they're not life-changing things. You don't have to get up tomorrow and be a different person, but turning off those subscriber things so that you're looking through things with your own lens. Or for me, it was notifications, that I was having severe anxiety about all the things popping up on my phone all the time. So I have no social media apps on my phone, and I have no notifications other than calls and text. And
Smart.
for me, that was a game changer. And for you, that might be something completely different. But for me, it was like, I need to stop the world screaming at me for a minute, and I'll come to it when I'm ready. When I'm ready to see my Facebook notifications, I'll go to Facebook, but I'll decide that, and I don't have to be told, where that is. So just speaking of writing things down, Steph, I know that you have found a really good way of journaling, which I think is really important, not just for people with ADHD, but anyone who's sort of on that journey to working out what is going awry in their organizing style or in their productivity, to maybe sort of see where those areas are that you're doing great and that you're maybe struggling with.
Yeah, so I started doing interstitial journaling, and it has been like a huge game changer. And again, I use Rome Research to do this because it just makes it easy. It's like bullet points. And within Rome Research, what I'll do is I'll start my day and do the / current time, and then it automatically pops in what the current time is. And then I just start working on something, and because I like to see how long it takes me to do certain things, because again, with my ADHD, I can do things so super fast, but then there's times where I get distracted. So those times I do get distracted, you could see it in Rome Research, because there will be times where you look at it on there, I'm like, oh, I got to go check Twitter for something. So I'll even write that in there. I'm like, the current time, check Twitter. And then oops, I may have scrolled a little bit too long. So I'll even put that in there where, okay, what's the current time now? So here's the total time I've been on Twitter. And then I will write in there, oops, fell into a Twitter hole. But it helps me with that whole like not feeling shame or guilt around it. It's like, it is what it is. This is what happened. But then I could be more mindful and going back where like, ooh, I was like, the mornings are bad for me because that's when a lot of fun stuff is happening on Twitter, like the news of the day and things. So I'm like, I need to stay away from Twitter during the morning. So I was able to see that with my interstitial journaling. So it's just been really helpful doing that. But like what Sarah, you were talking about, like writing things down. So I also have like, I don't know why, but my favorite paper is 11 by 17 inch paper. So it's like that big paper. And I know it's dorky, isn't it? So,
I love you have a favorite paper. I love that. That's so great.
And it's a little bit heavier weight too, but I also use Mr. Sketch markers. But I will go through, like this morning, I was feeling that anxiety. And maybe that is that barometer, Sarah, where I can kind of feel it coming on. But with that, I will sit down and be like, okay, just stop, write down everything that is making you stressed. Or I'll do it with my interstitial journal. Like, this is what's freaking me out, or this is what I'm worrying about right now. And I will just start typing whatever comes in my head. I won't even edit it. I'll just type. I hope nobody can actually access my Rome Research graph, because well, actually, it would be very entertaining if somebody even wants to look at that. But yeah, I'll just write down, here's all the things that I'm thinking about. And it just feels good getting that down on paper or getting that out digitally. It just makes me feel better. Like, okay, it really isn't that bad. Some of the things I was worrying about, I can just schedule it or set a bunch of reminders and plan it out, right?
Exactly. And anyone with kids, you can actually do this for them. So I have, without knowing it had a name, Steph, I have actually done this with my kids when we've been having, I'll be like, wow, our morning went to poop. What actually happened? So then the next day I won't actually change anything. I'll just be like, I'm just gonna sort of record what's going on. And this concept is exactly what they do in the army, these captain's logs, all of these different mediums. So these are not necessarily tools that are just good for people who have neurodiversities. These are tools that are good for everyone. We might just become a little bit more reliant on them, or we might use them in a way that's a little bit different. Like with you, Steph, you're recording all of your productivity, seeing where the gaps are, seeing what's working, because it's a double-edged sword, right? When we're writing down everything we're doing, we're not just there to pick on ourselves. We can also see, hey, I felt like I produced nothing today, because that is what depression and anxiety tell us. Oops, you did nothing. You are a terrible person. That is a lie. You actually did so many things that are great. You got kids to school, you got dressed, you made a bed, you called someone that was really difficult for you, whatever that looks like. And then it's not about any sort of perfection. It's about, reaching the next step in helping yourself. So,
And that's exactly right, because what you said with like my anxiety and depression too, being able to go back and look at that, because that's exactly what I think. I'm like, oh my gosh, you are awful. What did you get done today? Did you do anything on your list? And with my
Hmm.
ADHD, since I like to cycle through things super duper duper fast at like 10 times speed, the anxiety goes 10 times speed too. So I'm like spiraling down, spiraling down. It's kind of like when I watch all my videos, I watch everybody's YouTube video on like, well, I wish I could do 3 times speed. It's usually 2 times speed. But so I like it to go like really super duper fast. But that's like what my anxiety does. But I could look back at my interstitial journaling and be like, oh, I did get some things done today. Paul, are you laughing at my 2 times speed?
No, I get it. People sounding like chipmunks is the way to go.
yeah.
Like, yeah, I get it. It's so fast. Oh, real quick. Have you guys realized we've gone for 50 minutes? John mentioned like, oh, I'll watch the 50 minutes of the replay. I was like, this
What?
time has flown.
It
It's
has.
been
It
50
can't
minutes.
be. No. Well,
Hard
time flies when you're having fun.
Also, I wanted to ask, like everybody watching, please let us know what's your favorite type of paper. I would love to know. I don't.
Let us know in the chat.
Can I share my favorite? Because Stephanie,
Yes.
you reminded me that hey, my favorite note taking is if you want to feel like a genius, take notes on napkins, because if you write a note on a napkin, it's like I'm so busy and I'm so smart, I don't have time to get regular paper. I gotta just scribble this down on a napkin. You
Yes.
really feel you feel super genius when you write a note on a napkin. Because in movies, everybody's having their breakthroughs eating breakfast or like, at a diner, and they don't have time to get anything else. They write it down on a napkin. So if you want to feel smart, do napkin note taking. It's a weird feeling, but it's pretty awesome.
That's why I always keep my special rose gold pen too in my purse, because
Mm.
I'll write things on a napkin, or I'll have my little, these note cards. Again, I'm not plugging Levenger, but I love Levenger paper supplies. But I have these in my purse too, because I am constantly writing. And when I'm with Liv, she's like, seriously, are you writing that? Or like we watched the Colin Kaepernick Netflix special, and I had to keep pausing it because I was
Mm.
writing things down. And she's like, Mom, I can't watch things with you. Can we just get through this? I'm like, nope, gotta remember this.
This chat is killing me. Like, Stephanie, you are giving like deep, thoughtful advice, and Heather Aroma is dropping toilet paper as her answer. And I'm trying to keep it together and be like, that's really insightful, Stephanie.
Um,
Heather over here dropping toilet paper in the chat.
Paul, I'd kind of like to know what Sarah would think about writing on toilet paper while you're in the bathroom. Does she, what?
Let's
She's gonna.
let's So guys, just to fill you in
So-
on a little inside joke that I have with Steph and Paul, my OCD, the highest level I feel it is about wearing clothes more than once. And so sometimes in my life, things will sneak up on me where people mention about wearing clothes for a longer period of time. And until recently, I didn't realize this, but I actually gag anytime someone mentions about particularly undergarments, that if they wear them more than once, and we've learned that I can actually do it on demand. So I'm pretty sure they're waiting for a way to work this into the
Well, but
chat.
so Sarah, I really won't do it to you, but a little bit
Yeah.
more backstory. Because when we were on a call, was it a couple weeks ago? I was saying that there's this person on TikTok, this guy, and his wife, like he videotapes it, and he'll just go, "Bleh, bleh," and she'll just start like really gagging. And
He's a
Paul and Sarah,
monster.
they're like, I know, but they're like, okay, this is suspicious. There is no way that you could just say something or go, and then you start gagging. And me, I'm
Yeah,
feeling
I'm
bad
gag
because I think
suspicious.
this. Yeah, I'm like, feeling bad because I am laughing at this. When if my husband did that to me, I would die, because I would probably be the same thing. I'd be gagging. But I was telling them about it, and then when we talked about the other things, all of a sudden Sarah started gagging. She goes, "Oh, maybe you can just."
It's the old, once it's happened, if someone mentions it, there's a name for it. I think it's German. There's like a German word for like when that happens, when you bring something up and then it happens to you in your real life. But yes.
Oh, Schadenfreude? Like when you take pleasure in somebody else's stuff? No.
You know, like when you buy a car
I was
that
so close to sounding smart. I was so
you
close.
were, maybe that is
You
it.
didn't
I
write
don't
it
know.
on a napkin.
But you know, like where you like buy a car and you didn't see that many,
Mm-hmm.
but once you buy it, you see it everywhere. I think there's like a German word for that, and so maybe that's like what happened to us with the gag thing. You know that.
Oh,
Yeah, and Sarah,
Goofentag.
do not look in the chat right now, especially as that Christina Larson.
Chris,
You do not. Oh, she did it. Oh.
Oh no, this is.
let,
Oh no, are you chat susceptible? This is horrible. This is
Do it.
not
I
good.
can't even read it now, Christina. I
Oh
can't put
no.
your comment up on here. Look, Joe's
Oh
with
no.
me on the that thing that we're not going to talk about, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it freaks me out. Okay, in the in the in the deepest way. But I noticed in the chat a little while ago that you guys were putting in your personality types, so like INFJs, INSPs, and I think that this is another hidden gem. If you haven't done either an Enneagram test or a Myers-Briggs test, obviously, you know, these are not going to, there is more than 16 types of people in the world. But it is great at getting some personal insight into who you are, and then sort of the hybrid of that and whatever diagnosis you've received is like a really great tool to use and to sort of reverse hack your function issues. So if you're having trouble with executive function, with cleaning, productivity at work, and all that sort of thing, the combination of, you know, reverse hacking that, so what Steph was talking about looking at where those gaps are, about seeing what's good and then tweaking it, allows you to bring in things like micro habits. I'm a huge advocate of micro habits. If you haven't heard of these before, they are like, instead of saying, I'm going to lose 300 pounds tomorrow, which is obviously, you know, you should still have goals, but sometimes that falls into this unachievable thing, especially if you're feeling depressed or anxious. But micro habits are things like, I'm not, you know, I'm going to eat less chocolate than I ate today. I'm going to drink more water than I drank today. And so it's not about, you know, these huge things, but it's about small changes to helping you sort of achieve whatever it wants to do. Marcus is asking, is it bad enough if I found it highly entertaining? Oh, Marcus, if you think that's bad, yeah, they can get me going real bad. So let's not go there in the chat.
No, but Sarah,
Yeah.
I was just wondering, like you talk about those micro changes, and so you're saying micro changes, like if you wear the same piece of
Stephanie.
clothing, just
No,
I can't. Sorry, no, I can't.
I just envision it. Yeah, okay. Yes, that is a
But
thing.
wait, did you see John?
Change-
John said if you gag or you throw up during a live stream, it gets shared more. So I don't know. I think Paul and I are just helping you get numbers.
There you go.
That's-
We've cracked the algorithm, guys. All you need is the quick gag joke. That is perfect.
Yeah,
But,
you should
Sarah-
write a YouTube formula book called Throwing Up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll let Matt Haas know all things
you
YouTube.
go.
He can cover it next week about how the algorithm loves gagging. So yeah.
Sarah, can you? But I have actually a serious question about the micro habits. With people who have anxiety and perfectionism, to set those micro habits, do you have suggestions for, like, so if I say I want to, oh, I'm not going to say what I really want to say, but so if I want to just drink more water. So say, I drink a ton, but let's just say I want to drink 2 gallons instead of my usual 1.5 gallon a day. But then I don't meet that next day. What suggestions do you have to not feel that guilt and shame, being like, oh, I just can't do any more micro habits because I can't meet those goals?
So great question, because I think that perfectionism, you know, it's a huge thing, particularly if you have neurodiversities where your brain thinks differently. You are constantly striving to be like everybody else, but then you want to add some so that nobody knows, right? I'm I'm going to be a really good mom. I'm going to make sure that my kids have like that perfect lunchbox and clean clothes and I never miss a thing. And then I'm also going to be on the P&F committee. And then I'm also going to do this and that because I don't want anyone to know what's secretly going on underneath. So the hack with micro habits is, one, you can do things perfectly because they're super small. And so that is part of it. And of course, we want to break down that perfectionist mindset, but saying things like, instead of saying, I want to drink 2 gallons tomorrow, saying things like, I want to drink more than I did today, leaves it up to a way where it doesn't have to be that huge leap. It can just be that teeny tiny one. And so things around cleaning is, particularly if you struggle with procrastination or lots of projects going on at one time, is that I'm going to do one project tomorrow that I need to work on, or I'm going to do one step towards one project. And then you can sort of build on your wins. The other thing is, around sort of feeling really guilty if you don't achieve that and all those sorts of things. Because even with micro habits, stuff happens, right? You wanted to drink more water, but then you got distracted and it's 8 o'clock and you drank a gallon yesterday. And I don't actually know what a gallon is. So I'm assuming that's a normal amount of water.
No, it's a lot. I drink way too much water.
Okay, so say you drank a gallon the first day, you want to drink more the next day, but it's 11 o'clock at night and you've only drunk half a gallon. Please don't drink the other half all in one go. But the great thing is that, allowing yourself to be like, well, that's okay, because you know what, tomorrow I only have to drink more than half a gallon and I can restart that micro habit from where I'm at today and build on that. And so if you have a bad day, it's not like, oh, I was supposed to drink, 1.5 liters today. I'm just going to go to measurements I know. And so tomorrow, not only did I not do 1.5 liters today, I only did 1 liter, I'm going to have to drink 1.5 liters and some. I'm going to build on what I did today and just go. And so people are helping me out. A gallon is roughly 4 liters. Jinky, Stephanie, do you drink 4 liters of water?
I'm like, seriously, even before I'm like, what is this? I don't think this is a full liter, but I just drink a lot of water. I
love water.
I don't know. I love water.
How many ounces are in a gallon? Is it 64? Is it 128? Please let us know in the chat. I think you're supposed to drink 1 ounce for every 2 pounds of weight. Is that what you're supposed to do? I think that's what I've heard.
Is it really? I guess I have no idea.
That's what I've heard.
Maybe that works in my favor because I'm terrible at drinking water, but I am also quite small, so maybe it'll work out in the wash. So that'll be good for me.
Well, and I take allergy medicine too, so I think my mouth is always dry. Right. So maybe I really don't need as much water as I do, but I just keep drinking it then.
Yeah. So guys, if you are out in the chat and you have any last questions for us, we would love to help answer those. John is telling us there is 128 ounces in a gallon.
Wow.
Yep, 1 ounce. And 1 ounce for every 2 pounds.
2 pounds. There is a lot of maths going on here. That's not my strong suit.
No, and I don't ever do public math either. I hate regular math, but public math in front of people, no.
No, that's not what we're doing.
No.
Uh-oh. But if you drink caffeine, you will have to add more to offset that. What about, JV, what about if you drink caffeine instead of water? I think I'd do it the other way. I think that for every cup of coffee I've had, I'm like, well, that's one less thing of water I have to drink.
I think I saw, and this was a TikTok, it was some nutritionist guy last night who was actually saying that coffee is a diuretic, but you would have to drink like 5 or 6 giant cups a day to actually become a little bit dehydrated. And he was saying the water within the coffee kind of offsets that. So unless you're drinking, like my mom drinks one of those big, huge coffee pots, like she just drinks a ton of those big silver, I don't even know what those things are, but it's a lot.
Thank you so much for the super chat, Marcus. You're so
That's so nice. Marcus, I'm sorry you had to rob a bank, but that's so nice you're donating so much money.
That's what he's doing up late. He's up late where all the banks are shut. So
Wait, John is saying that we need to do private math coming up in hour 2. I am so sorry, but I'll be like, peace out. I'm out of here.
the day
Yeah, but if you
I worked
join-
out, oh sorry, Paul. The day I
No,
worked
no,
out that I could say to Alexa, like, what's 3 times whatever, what's this plus this, what's this, that changed my life forever. That teacher that told me you won't always have a calculator onto you, read between the lines.
Yes.
I got an Alexa and I got a phone. I'm set. So yes, you're.
You know what I think is really helpful too? Oh,
Yeah, go.
what were you gonna say, Sarah?
No, you go.
I was gonna say the thing that I find really helpful too is like so everybody knows out there watching, like we so Sarah, Stephanie, and I we're accountable to each other. So like every week we get together and talk and say what are we working on and what have we accomplished, and we have goals that we set. And I think having that accountability, having that person you can just even more just than accountability, but like verbalizing what you're going through and getting it out of your head. Like I think so much of the stuff that we deal with is because it's just in our head and we're ruminating about it and we're struggling with it and we feel so alone. But once we put it into words and put it out there with somebody else to like hear, I think it takes a lot of that anxiety, a lot of that stress away. And then also it helps us focus and you know, you guys have been really helpful saying like, oh yeah, just go do that thing, Paul. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. I should go do that thing, and vice versa. Like me to like the work that you guys are doing. So I think just verbalizing it can sometimes just help so much.
And you're right, like bouncing those ideas off of each other. And then when a certain person doesn't do their video for the week, there is a punishment.
We don't actually advocate this, but
No, it was fun. It was
the punishments are not like
No.
capital. Well, they probably felt like capital punishment for you, Steph.
Well, I told
true,
them
yeah.
that we were just joking, we were just chatting, and I was telling, I think we were talking about cleaning or the bathroom or something, and I just said, I don't, like when I wash my face with a washcloth. I don't splash water on my face because, and they're like, well, why don't you do that? I'm like, I don't know. So I start thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't splash the water on my face because I can't get the water out of my eyes fast enough. Because what if a killer is coming in the door, to come and kill me? Like, totally not. I mean,
We
not
learned
gonna
so
happen.
much about we learned so much about each other that day. We did learn, honestly, we agreed on so many of our fears. It was like very interesting how many are like, oh yeah, I do that too, which was actually very liberating as well to realize
Yeah.
just amongst the three of us, our ideas were not alone.
So
And we
please,
want Paul to do a live chat or a live feed all the time in his backyard. So in the comments, if you guys want Paul to set that camera up and have a live feed, it's not going to be goats like that one goat stream, but it's going to be Paul doing stuff in the backyard. We don't know what it's going to be. Please vote for, oh wait, there's no voting buttons, isn't it?
but I'm sure there's a way to do it, but I'll work that out for next time. But let
Yeah.
us know in the chat like what your fears are that you know are insane, but you still are scared of them anyway. Like I do the whole, you know, if I'm the last person up, like I will run through the house and turn all the lights off so that the killer doesn't get me. Paul, you have to tell them about when you pull up beside someone in the car.
Okay, listen, everybody out there, I'm sure I'm not alone. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there. When I come up to a or a stoplight and there's two lanes of traffic, I refuse. I will not pull up alongside somebody else, window to window, because I'm like, what if they want to shoot me? So I'm like, that's an easy shot. If I pull up, I'm an easy mark. So what I will do is I will position my car. Boy, hey, I'm opening up. I will position my car so they can't shoot me. There is the little metal bar. There's a car. There is the wall of a car between me, and they can't get a clear shot. Ha ha! You're not going to take me out at a stop sign. Stop
And now
lying.
that's all I can think about now when I pull up next to somebody is I
Mhm.
think about Paul. I'm like, ooh, I gotta offset my car. Gotta offset the
They got,
car.
they might shoot me.
It's happening. So, Steph, I've got a question here from Krishna. She is saying she is not ADHD, but her daughter is. How can she help her daughter feel more successful when she gets something done? So, obviously, like homework and all those things that, yeah, it's
So,
what's happening.
so Krishna, with my daughter, again, I am not a medical professional, and maybe this isn't what you should do, but she is in 8th grade now, and she does her homework mostly at like 11:30 at night because she like seriously cannot do it when she gets home from school. And now she's on the high school dance team, so she has dance right after. But like after supper, we always try to be like, okay, how about we work on some homework? And she just doesn't want to do it. So it's that hyper focus she has like right before she's going to go to bed. So she's like, I got to hurry up and get it done. But then there's times where she has more than one project. And this just happened last week where she'll come down then after one of the projects. And since I am a big dork, I will have like one of my little crazy things here, or like with the little squirrel is we'll just do like a little celebration. And it could just be something stupid, easy, be like, whoop, whoop, you did it, you did it, you did it. Now get back up there and do more. I mean, I don't say that, but just like, okay, now go and do your next thing. And then she'll come down and it's just like a really simple celebration. And what we found that works is not forcing her to do homework or do projects when we think it's the right time. And it was kind of hard, like with my husband and I, because he is he likes things structured, or he thinks homework has to be done at a certain time. So we started talking about that of, okay, let's try it where she just does her homework, she does her thing when it's best for her. And he's like, we could try it, we'll see what happens. And it has been working out a lot better, where it is weird. It's like, okay, you're at 11:30 at night, you're just starting your homework. Like, that's what works for her. And it's just, again, it's that whole, you don't feel like you have to conform to what the world tells you you have to do. You don't have to do your homework right after school. You don't have to have some kind of food reward or something like that. You could just do something silly and be like, woohoo, you did it.
And that's so like good that we can acknowledge that what works for one kid or what we think it should look like, it should look like homework when we straight away get home, but if it doesn't, that's okay too. Krishna, one thing that I have found really helpful, particularly for my teenage son, is that we set, this is going to sound silly, again, we are not medical professionals, we set him like pretend deadlines. So I will say, hey, we're going to pretend like the draft is the deadline. And so it's like his brain just works better when it's the last minute. And so he will come to us and we'll be like, hey, even though it doesn't actually matter at all, you know, have your shower by 9 p.m. And it's just like these little deadlines that help him somehow in his brain. It's like he's racing to the last minute and it just helps him to stay on track. So Siri, really quickly, this is my daughter, she's homesick today, but she is saying, do you guys have a habit of saying coconut, or are there any other words that you say? So, you know, Steph, I'm sure that you like some weird things. So Siri, it's not like she says it like instead of another word. She just sometimes will be sitting in the car, chilling out, and she'll be like, coconut.
That's awesome.
That is totally me to Siri. It's not, usually it's not like the same word over and over, but it'll be like a snippet of something that I heard somebody say, or a snippet of, it could be like just a couple words of something that I just read. And my brain just keeps going over and over and over. And then sometimes
Mhm.
I don't even realize that I'm saying it out loud. And all of a sudden I'll say it. And like my husband's like, what are you talking about? Like, oh, I don't know if I just even said that out loud. But I always like, even like counting or stuff too, like when I'm driving down the road to keep my brain focused, I'll just count the lines or count the trees or do that kind of thing. But I don't know if it's usually, I think that's interesting that you say coconut, because then I would just keep thinking, oh, I need to be on vacation on the beach with the ocean. That makes me calm. I think I might start trying to do that.
You started a thing. And like, this is why we enjoy telling you guys about our experiences, because if you have that thing that you think is weird and you're the only one that does it, it might not actually be the case. There might be other people who gag when they think about people wearing clothes more than once. Who are we to
Can I
judge?
can I share a stupid story from over the weekend?
Yes, please. We would love
Um,
that.
so I was so I was at the hotel, and I walked into the elevator, and I was just thinking. My mind was wandering. It was focused on something that I saw. So like I was just kind of thinking and ruminating about this thing over and over again. And I was there in the elevator, and then I was like, "Oh, great, the doors are opening. It's my floor." So I walk out, and a woman walks in, and I'm like, "Wait a second, this doesn't look like the third floor." I was still in the lobby. So I turn around and walk back in, and I realized I was so in my head that I was just standing like a crazy person in the elevator for like 3 minutes, not realizing, wait a second, this should be this should be quicker than 3 minutes to get to third floor. So, like a crazy person, I walk back in the elevator and feel like I should justify the fact I walked back out and then back in. And I'm like, well, that's not the third floor, and say nothing else.
Wait, so you walked back in? See, I would be so embarrassed. I
Yeah.
would have just kept going and found something else with the stairs or another elevator.
I walked back in and was like, well, I should say something. And I say, that's not the third floor. Didn't even make eye contact with her because I was so embarrassed. So I look like a crazy person telling myself that's not the third floor. What a nut. So,
I love it. I get so scared of these types of interactions. You know, like when two people are going for the same table, I get really like, I will always be the one that bows. And then I will do something so that they don't feel weird. Like I will pick up a napkin so it looks like I was going to get a napkin and not that table, so they don't
yep.
feel bad about what I did. It's a whole thing. But
Hmm.
Caradwen has a question for us about, and this is really common across a lot, any tips on keeping ahead of your brain's self-sabotage? So I think across the board, this is really common that you would have that sort of self-sabotage. And so where your brain is either maybe procrastinating, Caradwen, I don't know, you can tell me in the comments if these are the types of things, but either, you know, a lot of dark thoughts or procrastination, that sort of thing. So, I mean, we've talked about some already about, you know, writing down what's going on, and even writing down dark thoughts or things about that you're thinking. Sometimes when you look at it back, when you're reading it again, when you're out of that situation, you can sort of speak truth to your anxiety. That's what I do with my kids a lot. If they're feeling anxious, like we were talking about with our accountability calls, when we say things out loud and people are like, that's not a stupid idea, that sounds amazing, that speaks truth to our anxiety. That says, hey, what your anxiety is telling you is not true. And you can even write down mantras. That's another great one. You know, whatever I get done today is wonderful, is another one. I don't need to do everything perfect. Or things like I can clean perfectly for 15 minutes. So it doesn't matter if the whole house doesn't get cleaned, doesn't matter even if that job doesn't get finished, but you have cleaned perfectly for 15 minutes. So guys, do you guys have anything you could suggest for those
Um,
self-sabotaging?
yeah. So, Caradwin, first of all, love your name. Your name sounds like it's in a fairy tale. Um, I like it. It's a cool name. That's just personal. The second thing I'd recommend is there's a thing called Parkinson's law, which is that whatever we're doing, we will kind of like give in to that amount of time we give ourselves to do it. So if you give yourself a whole day to do something, you will naturally give yourself that entire day. You'll never, rarely ever are we like, cool, I got it done in 3 hours. We will kind of bleed into that full day. So, what I've found is really helpful is to just give myself very small amounts of time. So, Sarah, it's really similar to what you were saying, which I loved, is that you create like false or fake time limits or deadlines.
Deadlines, yeah.
and we naturally are like, cool, I got to work harder, I got to get out of my head, I just got to get this thing done because it's the deadline. And boy, that has helped me so much get out of my head and be like, I don't have time to doubt, I don't have time to circle around this idea, I just got to keep it moving. It's a really interesting study. So it's called Parkinson's law if you want to like look more into it.
Stuart was
So
saying something very similar. Work expands to fill the time allotted for it. And, if like you said, if you've got a whole day for it, that, it's probably going to expand to that. And so those little things like deadlines, speaking truth. Steph, do you have anything else that you want to throw out there
Yeah.
that might help?
One of the weird things when you're just talking about that Parkinson's law and how the space will fill a time where with my ADHD, because I have such a short attention span, I have to do things fast and quick. So oh my gosh, this is so funny. I wear shoes in the house. I wear athletic shoes in the house so I can hurry up and get to where I'm going, because otherwise we have hard floors everywhere and I will start slipping if I just have socks on and I can't get to where I need to go fast enough. And we don't have a big house, but I'm like, I need to get there, I need to get there. So that was just a little side thing. So I think with that Parkinson, it just made me think about that, where it's like you fill the space where I'm like, I got to hurry up and get this stuff done. But like with self-sabotage, I found that I self-sabotage when I'm trying to conform to the world or to conform to neurotypical behavior, and especially in the area of like mindset and meditation. Kind of similar to meetings when I said before, I just want to poke myself in the eye when I think about meditation, because I cannot make my brain stop. I have tried everything and I can't do it. And I finally realized not everybody can do it. So instead of meditating for that whole self-care, like mindfulness, I will get myself into a flow state. And this probably sounds ridiculous, but my flow state is turning on a timer, could be 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and just start researching or reading things. So a couple weeks ago, it was all about like NFTs. I was like, oh, what kind of wallet do I need to have for an NFT? How am I going to create the NFT? What is this whole gas fee? What do I need to do if I want to put this algorithm in it and make 10,000 NFTs at one time? What is doing with the content? So
mm,
I just needed to, I know I need to remove myself from what I was doing. And instead of meditating, I just went into that flow state, started researching, downloading things and doing that. And that was amazing to me. That what I felt like after that was what I picture people feel like after they meditate. Because when I try to
mm.
meditate, I just keep thinking like, oh my gosh, you are awful. Why can't you turn your brain off? Why are you thinking about that? What is going on there? And then it just circles down like, what was the point of that? I just bashed myself that whole session.
And I know Joe said as well, like the sabotage to conform. And one thing that I have learnt with my kids is I keep it like solution focused. So I'm like, okay,
Mm.
what are we actually trying to achieve here? We're trying to get out of the house without it being stressful. Okay, if that looks like us having a wacky playlist that lets us know, hey, when Imagine Dragons is on, we need to be in the shower. Like it's so solution based that we don't beat ourselves up that, hey, we're not doing what we should be doing, writing a list that has exactly what you need to do at what time, because maybe that's not what's going to work for you. And so then you're going to beat yourself up. I see this all the time, Carridwen, when people try different cleaning methods or decluttering methods that they've heard of, and they're like, everyone, this works for everyone else, why doesn't it work for me? And so then they feel awful about themselves, and I'll come in, I'll be like, but you did clean and you have done
Mhm.
all these great things. You just didn't do it the way they suggested. And so, getting over that, what is it I actually want to do? And it doesn't matter what it really looks like to get there, as long as it's not, destructive or unhealthy for me, that's okay. It's okay if it doesn't look like what everyone else does.
That's
So,
smart.
yeah. John is saying, Steph, that his wife is Japanese. So, but
But you can have special shoes. Like it's not outside shoes. Like I change shoes when I come in. So it's not like dirty shoes that I'm walking. Well, sometimes. I'm not going to tell Sarah that. But no, but usually it's like other shoes I just wear in the house or so. But yeah, And I've tried to not do it like, oh, I could just have bare feet. Where living in Minnesota, it's only a couple months out of the year where
So
you're actually wearing flip flops. But yeah, no. So I just, you can wear those shoes in the house. Just have a separate pair. Maybe she'll be okay with that.
Johnny
Yeah, and I'm
from
from California, and when I'm not surfing or meeting famous actors, I take off my shoes.
Funny story about stereotypes. When I went to the US, I stayed with my cousins and they threw me like a party where all, their friends came. They live in New York City. And my cousin is really funny. And so he was like, Sarah, tell them about how the kangaroos bring us our newspaper in the morning. And they were like, do they do that? Do they do that? And I'm like, yeah, yeah,
Oh my
oh
gosh.
yeah. We've trained them. When they don't have a joey in, they pop it in their little pocket, and it's great. It's really handy. But then later in the night, I was saying about how koalas are really feisty. And like if you saw one in the wild, you would never go and pick it up because like it'll scratch your eyes out. And they were like, no, that's a lie. You're joking. I'm like, no, the lie was the kangaroos bringing us there.
Well,
We're
kind of like
breaking down
those
all the stereotypes.
like the magpie or the birds that attack you. When we were on one of our sessions, she was telling us, I don't know how we got started talking about the birds when you're out, or maybe we are talking about the birds movie, the scary movies. But when you're out in Australia, the birds will attack. I'm like, no, they don't. And she sent a video. They attack, like touching you, not like the
Oh,
seagulls
yeah.
in Florida where they swoop down and like stay away from you. They're
Yes.
touching you.
And John just said about, when he feels like he's not cleaning enough, that he watches an episode of Hoarders and then he realizes his office isn't that messy. It's such a good topic to talk about because there are weird things that people do, like some people watch me clean my house or they clean along with me. And so sometimes thinking about those out of the box type ideas where they're not, necessarily what a therapist might suggest to you, but if they work, if they help you, that's okay. And another thing, sort of a little bit of off on a tangent, that one of my kids' therapists told me is that, particularly because I think anxiety runs through a lot of different mental health and neurodiversities, is that excitement and anxiety actually present in our body the same way. And so just being receptive to that, you might be excited to go on stage, Paul, or excited
Yeah.
about a new idea, Steph, but because we are so familiar with that feeling of anxiety, that we might be interpreting it as anxiety when it's actually excitement and it's there to help us, to push us to, go and do it.
That's interesting. So it kind of floods your body with dopamine. I mean, like when you get like anxious and excited. That's interesting. Wow.
You get
That,
those butterflies, your heart starts racing, like whatever that looks like
Yeah.
you. That's very similar to when you're excited about something. And for ADHD kids, if they are excited about something, sometimes their behavior is a little off kilter. And it's because it's very confusing for their brain to know whether it's that they're excited about something or anxious about something, because everything is presenting to them and flooding them at the same time.
when I kind of hacked my brain in the sense of I wanted to do more speaking. And when I worked at when I worked at Pillsbury and General Mills, like I would always be nervous getting up, talking to people. And I mean, I would do fine, but I hated that nervous feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm going to bomb. This is going to be terrible. So I did what you were talking about is it's that same feeling in my gut. And I turned it around. I'm like, you're not anxious, you're excited. So then I just kept asking for more opportunities and I kept volunteering and doing more speaking and talking to hundreds of people. And I just loved doing it, getting on stage. But I was able to like change that in my brain of, okay, what you're feeling in your stomach, what if that's just excitement? What if that's not anxiety at all? And it kind of just helped me go out and do it.
So true.
I think it's so interesting how it all comes down, not all comes down to, but so much of it comes from framing. How are we framing this thing? And we get to frame it like that's our luxury, is we get to frame it any way we want. So like when we started having this conversation, Sarah, and you mentioned that framing it as a superpower, I mean, that's our luxury. We get to frame it any way we want, and it's funny that we often like pivot and choose to frame it as a negative thing, which just so that means at the beginning of the outset of the conversation, we're already in this negative mental mind space. Whereas, like, if you frame it as a superpower, then it's same thing, but it's such a more creative, welcoming, let's have a conversation space, not something fearful. So,
And again, it comes back to how a lot of these things have been, perceived. It was up until recently, we stopped calling ADHD and ASD a disability. Like, that in itself is such a negative connotation and not really a true reflection of what these neurodiversities are. ADHD is not a disability. It's your brain is wired in a different way, and it needs different sort of stimulus, and it needs different sort of considerations. And even the way things have been portrayed in movies and TV, which is why I am so encouraged that we can come and share with you and, just let you see a bit, like John was saying, this is the perfect ADD episode. 1 second we're hearing about birds attacking, and then it's next about this. And that's what it's about. It's about showing you, hey, this is okay, this is cool. And if you're seeing these things in your kids, they're not going to turn out to be horrible adults who interrupt all the time. They are going to work it out. They might be, really eager to always contribute to a conversation, but there are things and ways that you can use and different tools you can use, and you can constantly be learning. If you are a parent of someone with ADHD, or you're an adult that thinks that you might have some ADHD tendencies, I highly recommend the book Scattered Minds by Dr. Gabor Mate. He is phenomenal about just explaining why you do the things you do, how to sort of, he calls it parent yourself out of it if you're an adult with those sorts of things. So if you haven't read it, if you have ADHD, you'll probably struggle to read it, but maybe get it on an audiobook or something. But yeah, I think it's so good.
can I make a couple quick recommendations too?
Yes, please.
So there's a book called Marbles out there, and it's a graphic novel. It's a Seattle artist or a comic writer she's dealing with bipolar, and it's a really beautiful book about her struggle and how she overcame it, and you feel very heard in it. So if you're thinking about you might be bipolar and you're wondering how to deal with it, I would really suggest the graphic novel Marbles, and you can grab it on Amazon. Also, I was going to suggest that if you are there is a big movement in video games called Zen improv games where you just kind of like get to focus on a task. It's very repetitive. It can be very peaceful. And if you're stressed out, it's a really nice way to settle the mind. And there's a couple games, one that just came out called Unpacking, which is a really beautiful game, and it's really fun. It's literally where you are in a room and you are given the opportunity to unpack somebody's boxes in a room, and they give you like a baseball, and they might give you a soccer ball, or they might give you a painting, and you get to choose where on the wall you're going to unpack that thing. Or it's a trophy. Where in this room are you going to unpack the trophy? And it's the journal. Am I going to put the journal underneath the pillow? And it gives you the freedom to choose. And it really gives you a chance just to kind of settle your mind and unpack. And it's a really beautiful game. There's other games called like Art of the Rally, which is just a driving game, but it's not about winning and losing. Like none of these Zen games are about winning and losing and that anxiety. It's just about driving around a track, turning, choosing where to go. And that's a really beautiful experience too. So Zen improv games can really help you a lot too. And they've helped me too.
I think I'm going to have to try that. I mean, it gives me a little anxiety just thinking about it now when you're talking about like the unpacking, because what are we at? November 8th. And I still have a suitcase upstairs from October 16th. That's where I got my curling iron, because that's the last time I used it was when we had to stay in a hotel. So I don't know, but maybe that would help me with actually doing real unpacking, to have a game of unpacking and being like, oh, this can be calming, instead of me constantly looking at that suitcase like, that's 3-day-old underwear. I'm just kidding. No, there's no clothes in there. There's no clothes in there. It was just my curling iron and I think a brush and something else. But But your other one about just driving, because I think with me, I get into the competitiveness of everything. Like I have to do it fast, I have to do it perfect, I
Mhm.
have to hurry up, and do it. Maybe this, and kind of what Marcus was talking about in the chat, with that whole meditation, you don't have to be still with certain meditations. Like this could be where I just calmly do those.
And
Hey, I
and
wear, oh yeah, I shovel snow in flip flops too. Sorry.
I was gonna say in Art of the Rally, you literally visit a statue of Buddha before the level. Like there is no winning and there is no losing in all these games. It's just kind of like experiencing it with like lo-fi music, and it's really nice.
So then maybe I wouldn't feel like I needed to be first or be so competitive, because
Yep.
nobody is going to be in first.
Nope.
Nobody is going to be in second, or
Nope.
first
It's
place
just a
means or
beautiful.
second. Yeah.
You're just driving through these nature scenarios, and there's no winning or losing. It's really nice.
I just, Marcus just said, after moving, I made myself unpack immediately because I knew I wouldn't do it for a month. And this is
Mm.
another perfect example of knowing yourself and knowing a way to hack your brain to, I'm going to do this right now. And it's almost like setting that pretend deadline. I'm going to make myself do it like it's the end of the world. And then, that helps to make sure you stay on task and things like that. So it's my mum, Janet, she's in the chat, asking Steph, have you ever tried medication for your ADHD?
Yes, and it was amazing. Like seriously, complete game changer. It was right after I had Olivia, and she is 13 now. It was like maybe a year after, maybe a few months after, and I was going in because I had postpartum depression, and they were asking these other questions. I'm like, I can't keep my life together. Like I have ADHD. Usually my life is messy anyway, but I can keep things together, but it just felt out of control. They're like, why don't we try Adderall? I took the Adderall. I was doing my master's program at the same time. So I had 2 kids, a family, working full time, going to school on the weekends, trying to get homework done. And that night, I think I took it like, I take Adderall at 5 o'clock. It was like right after supper. And then I sat at the table and I was just doing a bunch of research, reading. And my husband's like, oh, I'm going to go to bed. I'm like, it's like, what do you mean? It's like 9:30, and I realized it was 11:30. And so for 3.5 hours, I actually focused on one thing, and that has never ever happened. Usually, I mean, like if you can kind of see, like my mind is going crazy. So I was on medication for I think 3 years. Then in the US, in our insurance, it was just too hard to get it because it's considered a controlled substance. So you had to get this paper prescription, and I had to bring it to just a special pharmacy, and then the insurance wouldn't cover it, and I wanted to pay out of pocket for it, but then they wouldn't let me because it was a controlled substance. So it just got too difficult. I'm like, fine, I'll just try to do this on my own. So now I'm not medicated. I would love to be, but they're going to make me go through like this 4-hour test, and I'm like, I'll just try to keep managing it myself.
And I think that, it's really important that we break down some of those stereotypes around medication, and that, you would never say to someone with diabetes or like with me with a pancreatic condition that you should take pancreatic enzymes and all that sort of thing. And really, these are the things that help these people function. My children, for them, medication was the right route, but for some others, that may not be. But whatever you and your medical professionals decide, like whatever your treatment is, the course for you, that's great. I am all for supporting people to get whatever help they need, however that looks. And we need more people to say, to break down the shame about that. So, Steph, even though you're not currently taking it, my little sister, her name is also Stephanie, and she also has ADHD. And, for her, I remember when she started taking it, she would say, I felt like the world stopped shouting at me. And it was like,
Yes.
in that moment, I really understood that, this changed her life. She can focus and listen and just do all of those things. So I think it's really important that we, obviously we're not here to tell you what to do, but, if you are in a situation where you are that you know, there's no shame in that, and it's getting help and doing what you need to do to be the right you.
Well, and you're right, like the whole stereotype around, because I've heard people say, oh, yeah, well, when I was in college, I took Adderall and then I could do tests, I could get so much done. I'm like, you guys, you don't have ADHD. Like Adderall just helps everybody with that. I'm like, no, 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 you don't understand. And it's exactly what you just said, Sarah. It's that whole shouting. And I remember asking my husband a couple years ago, because he was asking, okay, we were just talking about this, but how did you get all the way to that? And so I told him my whole thought process on what happened. He goes, that all happens in your brain. I'm like, what do you mean? You could just sit there and have no thoughts at all in your brain? He's like, yeah. So I didn't
Mhm.
realize that that was even something that I was doing, where it's just constant. Like even now, there's so many things that, you know, I'm concentrating on us, looking at the chat, but then there's all these other things. And you're exactly right, where it is that whole shouting. And that's what I felt like when I was on Adderall, that I could finally just be, it was almost like you had all these balls in the air and you could just like, I could set them down for a second. People are
Mhm.
yelling at me. No, it was just amazing.
Because it actually has the opposite effect on an
Mm-hmm.
ADHD brain. So, whereas someone who doesn't have an ADHD brain would be, you know, running all around the house, getting all the things done, whereas it's actually the opposite effect for someone who has
Mm-hmm.
ADHD. It calms their mind down, it lets them focus on what they need to focus on, and the ability to focus on things that aren't interesting to them, like
Mm-hmm.
that can be really difficult, you know, because there are things we have to do in life and they suck. And you know, with my son, he really wants to do well across all his subjects, and there are some subjects that just aren't interesting to him, and so he would just be poring over this stuff, and he would, like, no matter how much he forced it, it's like that locked door. That's how I explain OCD to people. I don't get to choose what the compulsions are. You don't get to choose where your focus goes. You know, and
Mm-hmm.
even with anxiety and depression, it's like we'll just get over it. And it's not, if it was that simple, we would do it. If I could unlock the door and not be, you know, have the compulsion to wash every single item that touches anybody's body in my house, that would be really nice. But that's not where I'm at. And, you know, like we said, we've thought about how we can combat that with medication, without medication, with using those different things. So, yes, Janet says, you're amazing, Stephanie, and you totally are.
Hmm.
Thank you.
John says, I wonder if I take meds to calm down my overly hyper brain. Yes. I don't think so, John. I think that I think that's something times something people are scared of, even taking like mood stabilizers or antidepressants, that they'll lose who they are. And I think for the most
Yeah.
part, for a lot of people, that's not the case.
So John, I've taken meds and then I've also not taken meds as well. And I was very worried about if I took meds, would it change me comedically? Um, and here's the thing, there are lots of different meds out there and there are lots of different amounts you can take. So I think like a lot of things, it's not one size fits all, and you should completely feel okay testing it and being like, nope, not for me. And you can always go back to how it is right now. Like you always know, like this is my baseline, but I can test and experiment. So you always know what you can go back to, and it's not like a one direction only. Like you can always be like, nope, I want to go back to what I was. So that helped my anxiety before taking meds. So
And John, when I was on Adderall, like I think you might be similar, like with your hyper brain, where I think of with my brain, it's like there's not just one hummingbird, but a flock of humming. Is that the right term for a group of hummingbirds? I don't know. I consider a flock of hummingbirds where they're constantly like just flitting back and forth to this flower. They're going here, they're going there, they're going here, they're going there. I'm making connections. Oh, I'm making new connections. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. But when I was on Adderall, it was more focused. So I didn't feel like I lost that ability to research and read really quickly and absorb and make those connections. I just felt like it wasn't so manic and like I had to do it like a compulsion, because that's what it always feels like. It's like, oh no, you need to research more. You don't know, that whole, what is that, 80%, you take action once you know 80% of direction or whatever. I'm like, 99.9%. I need to know all of that before I will do something. Or so I just felt like the medication, and again, like what Paul said, you could find a medication that works for you. It might not work the same that it did for me,
Mhm.
but it just felt like it was more, I don't want to say calm because I've never been calm, but like more in control.
Yeah, more directed. And
Yeah.
again, like Paul was saying, sometimes when you walk down a path of treatment, you find a therapist and you think this is going to be great, and then you don't gel with that therapist the way you thought they were going to, or that medication doesn't work for you like it worked for Steph. That is another instance where we can let go of, you know, I'm going to find what's right for me, and that's going to be great. And if I can try things, and so if you go in with the expectation of trying rather than finding a cure, or seeing if something's right for you rather than everyone else is doing it, so this is going to be the thing that helps me, that, like Paul was saying before about framing it before you even get in there, that's going to make a big difference to how you feel if things don't work out, if that's not the right therapist for you, if this, like we've had all sorts of therapies for my kids, OTs, play therapy, lots of different things. And I always go in saying, let's give this a try. Let's see what we get out of this. And even if it's something you don't continue with, you've learned something. You might take some of it away. You might take it on a lower dose, like Paul was saying, but there is nothing lost in that process because you will have learned
Mhm.
something on the other end of it. So
Yeah.
I love that. Stuart, who is from Scotland, is saying, I started taking Cadbury's dark milk and it does wonders for it. Look, medicating through
Oh.
chocolate, I think it's right
Well,
up there on the
it
list.
is. Well, and caffeine too. So, like I mentioned, I drink a ton of water. I've never been a coffee drinker, but a couple of years ago, I started drinking coffee. And then last year, I started to get some weird heart palpitation things. I'm like, maybe it's coffee. So I completely cut that out. It was really just too much candy. But, but so I was like, okay, I'm not going to have coffee in the morning. Oh my gosh, I could not get anything done at all. So I added the coffee back in and have black coffee with just like a tablespoon of honey in it, so no refined sugar. And I just realized that the caffeine really does help with and again, maybe not everybody, but with my ADHD brain, it didn't like totally quiet things, but it got things
Mhm.
quiet enough that I can kind of focus and still do my interstitial journaling or going here and there, but not so like where I can't do anything. I'm just sitting there frozen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Krishna mentioned before about trying like CBD oils and things like that. They can be wonderful for all different sorts of things. And again, I think we're starting to move into a place now that it's legal to have those things, that the stigma around those things is going away as well. And I think it's really positive that people in a live stream are happy to say, hey, this worked for me, because you know what, someone else might be watching and that might be a good option for them. And it's all about, trying it out, seeing what works and what doesn't for you.
Also, I want to add that Coulter mentioned that a flock of hummingbirds is called a charm. But here's the interesting thing, Coulter. On the website I currently am on, it says a flock of hummingbirds can be referred to as a bouquet, a glittering, a hover, a shimmer, or a tune. So
I
that is
love
a lot of
glitter. This is perfect. But so really
a
it could
glittering
be all those things.
a glittering of hummingbirds. Yes, please. That's a great name.
And
That's
so what we really learned is that Stephanie chose the most boring version of a flock of hummingbirds.
And that's totally out of character for me, but yes.
So, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. I am so passionate, and I know that Steph and Paul are too, about just normalizing these different ways our brains work and sharing how we have found things that have worked and reframing your brain and making you feel less like an outsider, that there are other weird and wacky people. Thank you so much, Paul and Steph, for joining me today. I have absolutely loved this. Thank you everyone in the chat. If you're watching on the replay, we will all be checking the comments. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to leave those down below. I would absolutely love to do this again because I just think it's such an important part of our new way of sharing our world with each other, that having voices in these different spaces about different diagnoses, I think, is really important. So yes, thank you guys. We'll chat with you down in those comments, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.